Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World. My name is Anna Kalczyńska. Let's turn our attention now to the South Caucasus, where Georgia prepares for what may be the most extraordinary local elections in decades, with part of mainstream opposition boycotting the vote, while activists and opposition groups are mobilizing crowds for a parallel rally in Tbilisi, with a stated aim of peacefully overthrowing the Georgian Dream government. With questions over democratic reforms and growing tensions between Russia and the West, the stakes couldn't be higher. Joining us now is Tinatin Japaridze, geopolitical risk analyst, Eurasia Group, to help us unpack what these elections mean for Georgia's future and for global stability. Good evening, madam, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Anna.
So the vote takes place amid a partial boycott. At least 9 opposition groups announced they are boycotting what they see as a sham vote. I wonder what could be the weight of these elections for many reasons, one of which being that it's a country where municipal governments exercise limited power.
Well, that's a very fair point, Anna. And first and foremost, we need to also bear in mind that there will be an absolute absence of the OSCE observers and domestic monitors during this election. So confidence collapses even further. I don't think that anyone is under any illusion that this will be a free and fair election. Not at all. In fact, it's going to be quite the contrary. However, what is still very significant is that, as you mentioned, while the 8 opposition parties are boycotting the election, 2 of the other ones will be participating. And that is quite interesting and important because that shows us that there is at least an attempt on the opposition side to show everyone that they do still have a voice and they are running in this race, even though in many ways I do think that the outcome, the end result, is predetermined by the Georgian Dream, given the fact that it's a single party system that they have built.
Right, so considering the boycott, what could be the outcome? I mean, what could be the turnout also?
The turnout is very interesting. A lot of people that I spoke to during my time in Tbilisi told me that they have very little faith in terms of their voice making a difference, which of course is extremely sad for a number of reasons, because our voice is what we have. And many of us who were part of the Soviet Union, Georgia being one of those countries, the fact that there was no power of that one voice that one could practice on a regular basis was really in many ways tragic. And now that Georgia as an independent country does have that option, there are some who don't want to exercise it because ultimately they understand that there is a very good chance that voice may not matter. But there is also another sliver of the population that believes that even if the outcome is predetermined and the Georgian Dream is going to win in this election because they have built a system around themselves, they have a steady use of state resources, disinformation, intimidation. So all of this has already hollowed out the process. But even so, they feel that they still need to go. They need to show up and they need to show everyone, including the Georgian Dream, that their voice still does matter. Where that voice, I think, will be more effective is in the streets. We have now surpassed 300 days. It's over 300 days of nonstop protests in Tbilisi and beyond. And there will be a mass rally tomorrow in the capital that will be extremely important. I think it's a critical chance for those, not just the opposition, but those who disagree with what's happening in the country, those who don't want the regime anymore to be in charge of their lives and their country, for them to show that they're actually still standing up. And the fact that last year's election was neither free nor fair, and some still continue to insist that the election was rigged in the Georgian Dream's favor, it's their opportunity to say that, yes, we know that this is how the Georgian Dream does its business on a regular basis. However, we still want to show up and we still want to remind them that we are still here and we are not going to let the Georgian Dream run the country because their vote matters too.
Right, so this parallel mass protests may seem as a main intrigue on October 4th during the polling day. Now, the organizers have invited supporters to peacefully overthrow, as they say, the Georgian Dream government. This rally is scheduled for 4 p.m. It's expected to gather crowds, and a transfer of power should be completed, as they say. So what's to expect of this great concert or rally?
Well, first of all, I will say, Anna, that I'm a bit skeptical just in terms of the optimism of some of the organizers of the upcoming mass rally in terms of them ending the regime by 8 p.m., which is what they've claimed. That would definitely be a miracle that nobody is expecting, realistically speaking, just given the fact that the Georgian Dream has been in power for 13 years. And by no means are they going to be willing to give up power overnight. But having said that, protests do remain the loudest voice of dissent. And Rustaveli is going to be the place where, as I said earlier, the protesters will remind the Georgian Dream and the world outside of Georgia that they are still there and that they are not giving up. But street energy alone does not equal political power. And I would like to emphasize that because, yes, of course, it's extremely important that the many thousands of people continue to believe that through their presence, they're going to bring about change. And that is absolutely true. However, so far, the regime has relied on calibrated repression. So, just enough intimidation, arrests, and media control to get away with it. And they do get away with it. So for protests to matter, they need to morph into a coherent political project.
Absolutely.
For them to be able to consolidate that sentiment into actual votes. And the problem with that is that we do not see a leadership that is going to be able to make a difference on the opposition side and be able to rally all the votes in their favor, because currently there is no charismatic, strong leader that is going to be able to get the people from the streets to the actual polls.
Well, let me go back to what you've been just saying about the strategy of the opposition. Well, the opposition itself seems to be split between participating or boycotting these elections. Now, according to June poll results by the Tbilisi-based Institute of Social Studies and Analysis, only 20% of opposition voters unconditionally supported the opposition's participation in those local elections. 26 said would back participation only if new parliamentary elections were held in parallel. So do you consider those parties who chose to participate in these elections as a good strategy?
Well, that's arguably a tricky question to answer, because it depends on how one looks at this issue, whether boycotting means giving up and essentially letting the Georgian Dream know that they are able to do whatever it is that they want to do and that the playing field is free for them to manipulate. On the other hand, I personally would argue that having no opposition presence whatsoever is going to harm not just the opposition movement, but also the many thousands of people who actually want to be able to vote for another party but the Georgian Dream. Now, if there is a very small turnout, that would certainly help the Georgian Dream to be able to cement their power, because every vote that is not cast is going to essentially be a vote for the Georgian Dream. And of course, everybody knows that. So having less opposition candidates is ultimately going to harm that movement, I believe. But the fact that there are two that are participating, that will be very interesting on top of everything for us to see whether or not they're able to produce even the most modest results.
Let me quote Salome Zurabishvili, the former president who happened to pay a visit here to Warsaw Security Forum. And in an interview with Don Arleth, our colleague, she said she had no expectations whatsoever as to the outcome of these elections. However, she argues that since the ruling Georgian Dream Party won the presidential elections, its control over governmental bodies is absolute. Let's have a listen.
Those pseudo-elections are held after we've had last year's parliamentary elections, which, as we all know, were under very serious interference by Russia and very serious manipulation, both by local authorities and Russian technologies of different kind, a little bit what we have seen now in Moldova, and now our partners discovered that what we were saying was so completely true. And so the situation since then, since the parliamentary elections, has only deteriorated in terms of legislation and control, total control by the ruling party over the Electoral Commission and everything that you need for decent elections.
So what's the impact, actually, of the Russian disinformation in Georgia? What's your assessment?
It's very strong, and it's particularly strong because the local forces are able to actually take that disinformation directly sometimes, or other times the tools that Russia uses to spread its disinformation, and to actually produce something for local consumption. And that does work. I mean, one of the examples is this sort of war hysteria that the Georgian Dream was able to use very successfully in the lead up to the 2024 parliamentary elections, when a lot of their supporters were and still continue to be very concerned that if Georgia continues to move toward the EU, that somehow the European Union will then use Georgia for it to become a participant in Russia's war against Ukraine and open a second front on Georgian territory. And that did work very, very well. Even those people who don't necessarily agree with the Georgian Dream, they have cited this as one of the reasons why they went to the polls last year, not to vote for the Georgian Dream per se, but to vote against a second front in Georgia.
Thank you so much, Tinatin Japaridze. Thank you once again, and fingers crossed for another chapter of Georgia's fight for democracy on October 4th. We'll be watching here in TVP World, of course. Have a good night.
Thank you, Anna.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned to TVP World for more commentaries and updates.